Eleanor had always thought of nuts as healthy. A handful here, a sprinkle on her oatmeal there. At 72, she believed her diet was balanced, natural, simple, sensible. But when her blood pressure began creeping up and her joints started aching more than usual, she brushed it off as just getting older. That was until her doctor sat her down after a routine checkup and pointed to her cholesterol numbers. "You're doing better than most," he said gently, "but some of the nuts you're eating might be making things worse, not better." She was stunned. Almonds, cashews, peanuts, they'd always been her go-to snacks. "It's not about nuts being good or bad," he explained. "It's about which ones support you best after 60. That night, Eleanor went home and began digging. What she found shocked her. Some nuts, especially when salted, roasted in seed oils, or overly processed, were loaded with inflammatory compounds that made joint pain worse, increased sodium intake, and even spiked blood sugar. But others, like walnuts, Brazil nuts, macadamias, and pistachios, were packed with brain-boosting omega-3s, heart-healthy fats, and compounds that supported circulation and muscle recovery. It wasn't about giving up nuts. It was about choosing the right ones. She cleaned out her pantry that same night, placing a new bag of raw walnuts next to her tea, promising herself she'd nourish not just out of habit, but with intention. The change felt small, but powerful. Eleanor didn't want to just survive her 70s. She wanted to feel clear-headed, strong-legged, and calm-hearted. And if the path to that started with a few smarter choices in a snack bowl, she was ready. Because what no one told her before was that even healthy foods could turn harmful with age, unless you know what to look for. The first nut Eleanor gave up was the one she'd trusted most, peanuts. They had been her lifelong favorite. Peanut butter on toast in the morning, roasted peanuts as an afternoon snack, even peanut brittle during the holidays. But after learning more, she realized peanuts weren't really nuts at all. They were legumes. And worse, they were often processed with hydrogenated oils, high sodium, and additives that increased inflammation. Her doctor had explained how chronic inflammation was a hidden driver behind joint pain, cognitive fog, and even arterial stiffness. "You may not feel it directly," he'd said, "but over time it eats away at your vitality." Peanuts, especially the salted, roasted, or honey-coated kinds Eleanor loved, were doing her no favors. And when she dug deeper, she found studies linking excessive peanut consumption with mold-based toxins called aflatoxins, which could harm liver function and immune response in older adults. It was heartbreaking to throw them out. But Eleanor replaced her jar of peanut butter with a new one, made from almonds, with no added oils or sugar. The switch wasn't just for her taste buds. It was for her circulation, joints, and long-term clarity. She felt empowered knowing she wasn't just removing a food, but replacing it with something better. She began to view every snack not as a treat, but as a decision: fuel or friction, support or sabotage. Within 2 weeks, she noticed her hands weren't as stiff in the morning. Her digestion improved. Even her mood seemed steadier. She hadn't expected such change from something so small. But it wasn't small. It was cumulative. And the more she learned, the more she understood. The wrong nuts can quietly wear you down. But the right ones? They can rebuild you, one mindful handful at a time. Cashews were the next to go. Eleanor had loved their creamy texture, the way they melted in her mouth and gave a satisfying crunch in her stir-fries. But as she read deeper into the research, she learned that cashews, while not entirely harmful, were dangerously misleading for seniors over 60. Though they contained some minerals like magnesium and copper, they were also high in omega-6 fatty acids, the kind that can throw off the body's delicate balance when not paired with enough omega-3s. Her doctor explained it this way: too much omega-6 without omega-3 is like trying to build a house with nails, but no hammer. It creates inflammation instead of strength. Eleanor also discovered that cashews had one of the highest carb counts among nuts, which made her afternoon handfuls a quiet threat to her blood sugar, something she had been trying to stabilize for years. They weren't evil, just unhelpful for where her body was now. She wanted clarity, not cravings, strength, not tuwikitaldawing. So, she swapped them out for macadamia nuts, a softer, richer alternative that carried nearly zero omega-6s and instead were packed with monounsaturated fats that supported heart health and cognitive function. They didn't spike her energy, but gave her sustained calm, and she noticed she snacked less throughout the day. Her brain felt quieter. Her knees didn't ache as often, and there was a certain peace in knowing her body wasn't fighting her food anymore. She wasn't chasing a miracle, just making peace with the things she'd once eaten blindly. Every handful now came with awareness, every substitution a small gift to her future self. Cashews hadn't betrayed her, but her needs had changed. And now, she was choosing what served her best, not out of fear but out of love, for her heart, her brain, and her legs. The hardest nut for Eleanor to give up was the honey-roasted variety. Whether almonds, peanuts, or mixed blends, they had become her comfort during late-night television, quiet afternoons, or moments of loneliness. She never thought of them as harmful, just sweet and satisfying. But what she didn't realize was that the sugar coating, even in small amounts, turned those nuts into an inflammation bomb. Her doctor called them metabolic landmines, tasty, familiar, and dangerous when consumed regularly after 60. The sugar not only spiked her blood sugar, but combined with the roasted oils, usually processed seed oils like soybean or canola, created oxidative stress in her body. It was like fueling a fire under the surface. The sugar fed it, and the bad oils kept it burning. That fire, over time, showed up in the places that mattered most: her knees, her memory, her blood pressure. She thought she was snacking smartly, but she was unknowingly draining her strength. It took willpower to toss them out, but she replaced her sweet fix with something better: pistachios, raw and unsalted. Bright green, naturally rich in potassium, vitamin B6, and antioxidants, they became her go-to evening snack. They supported her heart rhythm, helped manage blood pressure, and even improved circulation to her legs. What surprised her most wasn't the flavor. It was the feeling. She felt lighter, calmer. She no longer had the sugar highs followed by sluggish lows. And best of all, her ankles didn't swell the way they used to by bedtime. Eleanor learned that even healthy snacks could betray you when disguised with sweetness. But by choosing whole, uncoated, naturally nutrient-rich options, she wasn't giving up flavor. She was gaining power. Quietly, bite by bite, she was turning her body's slow burn into steady strength. And every time she cracked a pistachio open, it felt like opening a door she didn't know she'd closed. There was one more nut Eleanor had relied on for years without ever questioning it: salted mixed nuts, the kind that came in a tin with a glossy label and a promise of heart-smart eating. They were convenient, familiar, and always stocked in her pantry. But when she finally looked at the nutrition label, she was stunned. Each serving packed nearly 200 milligrams of sodium, often more, and that was just a small handful. Most days, she ate double that without thinking. Her doctor had warned her that excess sodium stiffens arteries, raises blood pressure, and dehydrates muscles, leading to cramps, fatigue, and even cognitive fog in older adults. And Eleanor had felt it. The tightness in her calves at night, the sudden spikes in her heartbeat, the headaches that came and went. She thought they were just part of aging, but they weren't. They were warnings, so she did what few would. She emptied the entire tin into the trash, and in its place, she started buying raw walnuts, not just because they were unsalted, but because they were rich in plant-based omega-3s, a rare nutrient in most diets and critical for brain function and anti-inflammatory support. Within days of swapping them in, she noticed she was sleeping better. The burning behind her eyes lessened. Her knees didn't throb after long walks, and emotionally, she felt clearer, less anxious, more present. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and cumulative, like her body had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Eleanor realized that healthy packaging didn't mean healthy food. Not for her, not anymore. Now, every time she opened a bag of walnuts and added a few to her breakfast or afternoon snack, she felt like she was protecting more than her heart. She was feeding her mind, calming her body, and rewriting her routine with wisdom. The changes were beginning to stack, not just in her kitchen, but in her life. Eleanor started to notice something subtle every morning. When she stood up from bed, her legs no longer felt like they were dragging weights. The soreness she used to feel in her calves after sitting too long was fading, and when she walked to the corner store, she didn't have to pause and rest halfway. She had never thought that something as small as switching the types of nuts she ate could impact her muscles, her joints, her brain. But the difference was becoming undeniable. Her doctor confirmed it. Your inflammation markers are down, and your circulation looks better than last visit. And Eleanor knew it wasn't a coincidence. The pistachios had given her potassium, easing cramping. The walnuts fed her brain, sharpening her focus. The macadamias helped calm the constant fire in her joints, and the Brazil nuts, which she'd just introduced, gave her selenium, a powerful mineral most seniors lacked that helped regulate thyroid function and reduce fatigue. Just one Brazil nut a day, her doctor had said. That's all it took. The effect wasn't loud, it was steady. Her steps were steadier, her breath more even. Her mornings no longer began with hesitation. She felt less like she was managing decline and more like she was reclaiming control. What started with a few quiet substitutions had become a daily act of self-respect. She realized something important. Nutrition in your 70s isn't about dieting or denying. It's about supporting your system at its most fragile point with foods that know how to help. Eleanor was no longer eating out of habit. She was fueling her future, one carefully chosen handful at a time. Eleanor kept a small ceramic bowl on her kitchen counter now, her strength bowl, she called it. In it were carefully measured handfuls of the nuts that had slowly become part of her rhythm. Walnuts for her brain, pistachios for her circulation, macadamias for her joints, and a single Brazil nut tucked in like a secret weapon. Each morning, after her walk, she'd return to the kitchen, pour a glass of water, and sit with her bowl. Not rushed, not distracted. It was a pause of intention, a ritual. And over time, it became more than nutrition. It became a moment where she reminded herself that she was still building, still worthy of care, still capable of strength. It wasn't that she never craved her old habits, the peanut butter crackers, the sugary mixed nuts in the pantry. But she didn't miss the way they made her feel, heavy, sluggish, swollen. This new ritual gave her something more precious than comfort. It gave her clarity. Her memory improved, enough that she could now go days without losing her keys. Her doctor noted her blood pressure was more stable, and her physical therapist, who had been helping with her balance, said, "You're turning a corner, Eleanor. Whatever you're doing, it's working." That meant everything, because no one had ever told her that nuts could be medicine, or that some could be poison, that snacks weren't neutral, especially after 60, that one small bowl a day could either rebuild her or erode her from the inside out. Now, as she cracked each nut open with calm fingers and placed them in her bowl with care, she felt something new blooming then in her life. Control, calm, and quiet confidence. She wasn't following a trend. She was writing her recovery. One thoughtful choice, one strong handful, one morning at a time. The changes in Eleanor's life didn't go unnoticed. Her daughter, who visited on Sundays, remarked how much more alert and light on her feet she seemed. "You look sharper," she said one afternoon, watching Eleanor breeze through the kitchen without bracing herself against the counter. And she was. Eleanor didn't stumble as often. She didn't forget appointments. Her voice carried more energy, her eyes more presence, and it wasn't because of some new medication or fancy supplement. It was the nuts. The switch had been so small, yet the outcome so wide. Her daughter, curious, began asking about the routine. Eleanor walked her through it. Which nuts to avoid, why roasted or salted versions caused swelling, how the wrong oils triggered joint pain and mental fog. She explained the quiet power of omega-3s, the rare magic of selenium, and how good fats weren't the enemy, but the allies of aging muscles. She shared how some foods disguise themselves as helpful, but silently harm, especially when the body is more fragile, more absorbent of damage. Her daughter listened, amazed, and decided to build a bowl of her own because, as Eleanor reminded her, prevention starts before weakness shows up. That Sunday marked something unexpected. A generational bridge. Two women, different in age but united in strength, passing on knowledge not found in commercials or loud headlines, but in lived experience. That day, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in years: relevance. That what she'd learned mattered not just for her survival, but for her legacy. These nuts weren't just food anymore. They were daily lessons, quiet armor. They were her way of reclaiming health in a world that too often wrote off women after 60. And she wasn't just stronger. She was showing others how to be. One bowl, one voice, one Sunday at a time. Eleanor stood in front of the mirror one morning, brushing her hair with slow, thoughtful strokes. There was a calm in her shoulders now, a steadiness in her spine. Her reflection looked more upright, more alive. It wasn't about looking younger. It was about looking capable. She had always feared the quiet decline, the unspoken shrinking of independence that happens in pieces. Stiff joints, forgetful moments, unsteady steps. But now she saw something returning. Her legs didn't hesitate as much. Her hands weren't as puffy when she gripped the garden shears. Her words came faster in conversation. And it all traced back to one surprising change: what she had put in her pantry. The shift hadn't been about dieting or control. It was about learning what her body truly needed to fight time. Not with denial, but with fuel. She had stopped eating out of habit, out of emotion, or out of outdated beliefs. Now she ate with purpose. When friends asked for her secret, she didn't list off vitamins or complicated regimens. She told them simply, "I changed my snacks." And then she explained the difference between nuts that help and nuts that harm. She even wrote it out, her 4 to avoid and her 4 to include, and handed the list to her walking group. Some were skeptical, but weeks later they began sharing similar stories. "My knees don't hurt as much. I'm sleeping better. My mind's less foggy." Eleanor smiled, not because she had become someone's guru, but because she had proven something to herself, that it's never too late to reverse a slow fade, that what you eat between meals can change how you walk through the day. Her strength had returned, not loudly, but faithfully. And with each step forward, she knew she had earned it, one mindful snack at a time. Eleanor didn't expect a bowl of nuts to change her life, but as she sat on her porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, legs stretched comfortably, a book resting in her lap, she realized how much had shifted. She wasn't chasing youth. She wasn't trying to look 20 again or defy age. She was simply reclaiming what age had tried to whisper away: her clarity, her stability, her calm. And it had started with attention. Attention to ingredients. Attention to how she felt after eating. Attention to what strengthened her versus what slowly pulled her down. Over the months, she had let go of 4 habits: salty, sugary, overly roasted, processed nuts that had once filled the silence of her days, And in their place, she welcomed 4 quiet healers: walnuts for her memory, pistachios for her blood flow, macadamias for joint calm, and 1 Brazil nut a day for her hormones and mood. The result wasn't overnight, but it was undeniable. She moved differently, thought differently, felt differently, and most of all, she lived differently. No longer afraid of stairs or forgetful pauses. No longer weighed down by inflammation, masked as normal aging. She had found her balance again, in both body and routine. And now, when she looked at the small bowl she still set out every morning, it wasn't just food. It was a promise, a ritual, a reminder that even the simplest choices, when made with care, can restore what time tried to take. She knew many wouldn't believe that nuts could do all this,